Okay, so today we are going to look at the interface for Premiere. Now, many of you may have already used it, maybe already tried to, make things happen in it, maybe even successfully got things to work in it. However, I think it's good to sort of go over at least what the sort of basic layout is and what the purpose of some of the functions are that you see, and maybe even do a little bit of simplifying to sort of make the layout a little easier on the eyes. So let's go to Premiere and go over the basics of it. All right, so I have launched Premiere, so I'm going to do a new project. All right, so we get to name it something. So I'm going to call this a Know the Interface. I'm a terrible typist. And I am going to browse, and I am going to put this. I'm going to put these in a folder called Classroom Examples so that I know where to find it later. And now that path is there. And I have named it. And we have some choices here. We usually want to leave it on GPU acceleration if you have it. That means if you have a graphics card capable of helping Premiere render out all its effects and everything, then you should use it. There are times when we might want to turn it off, but we will get to that eventually someday. However, there are sort of hidden tabs here. And the general one, most of this does not need to change. We're not capturing any videos. It doesn't really matter what this is set to, etc., etc. We do want timecode though, and we want to see our audio sampling. However, if we go to the tabs here, we can switch over to scratch disks. Now this becomes kind of important. This is where we want to make sure we have a media drive that is separate from our boot drive. Okay, so the goal is to make sure that you're pushing and pulling all your video files from something that is separate from the hard drive that is running the program and the operating system for what you're doing. So we want to make sure those are different. Do as I say, not as I do, because in this particular example I don't have an external drive with the media on it. But just know that you go through and you say, hey, captured video. We're not capturing video anymore. That's old school. But when you start getting down to video previews and audio previews, those absolutely are the software generating new audio and video files based on your renders. Previews is Adobe's word for render. So basically anything that it can't do in real time, it's going to create a file for it, and the question is, where is it going to put it, and is it a media optimized drive? So as you can see here, I have a media optimized area that I'm pointing those to. Your project autosave, it's really smart to put that on something other than your boot drive. You lose your boot drive, you lose all your backups. Not cool. Maybe put it on the media drive with you. You can plug in a thumb drive and add that as your sort of backup to everything. You want to make sure that it is as safe a protected backup as you can possibly go. And of course, a project contains no media. This is just the instructions on what you did to cut it. You have to go get your media back, link to it, and then it will reassemble itself when you launch that backed up version. But yes, project autosave, always good to be a different drive. Again, do as I say, not as I do. In this particular example, I am sort of tethered to my internal drive for these things, but I don't want to do that too much because I will burn up my internal drive and the system won't work as well. Anyway, so there are some basic areas. Basically, you want to set all these to your media drive if you can. Some sort of other drive than your boot is the key. And the final two sections are for if you buy footage from Adobe and it wants to put it somewhere, motion graphics, templates, things like that, where is it going to go? And so again, your media drive makes the most sense. Ingest settings, we don't really worry about this anymore. This is when you're copying stuff off of tape or even disk formats like XDCAM. You won't be doing that most likely, so not a problem, but we want to double check our scratch disks. If someone else gives you a project and you open it and the scratch disks for that project they gave you was set to something else, it will reset your system's settings. So then the next time you go to start a new project, it's going to follow whatever the last settings were, and that could really screw stuff up. So you want to get in the habit of at least clicking on this tab, taking a quick look, making sure everything's going where you expect it to be going before you actually just create the project. So you want to make sure you double check these things every once in a while. I try to do it every time I start a new project. It's safest that way. All right, we're going to hit OK. This is sort of the default layout screen. So we're going to look at it this way before we tinker with it, because I want, anytime you look up a tutorial online or whatever, it's almost always going to be laid out this way, because a lot of people have stayed with the sort of design that they give you and the number of tabs and all that kind of stuff. I like to change it a little bit and thin it out, and I'm going to show you how to do that, and you may want to go with that, especially if you're watching my videos, because I will have the screen laid out a little differently than the default, but not hugely. It's subtly different. So what do I mean by that? This whole screen can be laid out in a lot of different ways depending on what mode you click on. So up here at the top, we have a list of presets that are built in, and then I have a few that I've made that are custom that are added on here too. This can be put away. If you double click it, it goes away. It gives you a little screen real estate back. We'll leave it open for now because again, that's the default. If you click on learning, you're going to see a totally different layout. It's going to give you access to the little training videos and examples they give you, which is cool, but you're taking this class, so you shouldn't need it. Assembly is a little bit different layout. Color is supposed to be optimized to give you access to all the things you need or will want to see while doing color correction. It's all right, not bad. Effects, again, if you're controlling lots of effects, doing lots of layering, this tends to emulate a little bit more what After Effects is laid out like, so it feels a little more at home for you if you're used to doing After Effects. Audio focuses on getting you access to the audio controls that you need to be able to get to. And then there's graphics and libraries, and I won't go through every single one, but you get the idea. It's basically their idea of what they think you'll want access to. And in some ways they're right, sometimes they're not. Let's go back to editing though. So the basic layout is, we're basically emulating the way original linear editing worked. You had sort of a playback window, which is where you would load your source material. So you'd pop into a deck your raw footage, and you'd queue it up to a moment that you'd like, and you'd mark the beginning and end of what you wanted. And then on the right-hand side, you would see your blank tape, or sort of your master that you're building, and you would queue it up to the part you wanted to copy that clip to. So you'd mark an in and an out on the source side around what you like, and an in or an out, depending on what kind of edit you're doing, we'll talk about that later, as to where you want it to go in the piece that you're building, and then it would copy it over. What we didn't have back in the linear days was the ability to see it in any kind of graphic interface. So the timeline, which tends to go down here, is tracks and basically gives you a visual representation of the assembled elements that make up the story you're building. That'll make more sense when we open one later. They also have sort of tucked some things around. There are tabs across the source window. You can get to some effects controls here. You can get to an audio mixer here. You can look at the metadata for your files, which is basically the data that's embedded in the clips. Let's just get rid of that tab. It's one less thing to clutter up our screen. The clip mixer is going to be very important down the road. We're going to leave that open. We're going to leave the effects controls open. And of course, we're going to want our source window here so that when we open clips, we can see them. There are no other tabs across your program window, which is this over here. That's good because rarely would you want to change or go away from seeing what your timeline looks like. And that's basically what happens when you have a timeline down at the bottom. As your line moves around, it shows you what would be on the screen at that moment in time. All right. Around the outside, we also have some audio levels, which are nice to have and handy to watch. Maybe not in the early rough cutting stage, but certainly as you get deeper into your edit. They are, however, fairly thick, and they take up a lot of screen room. You can actually grab the edge of it and make it thinner. If you go too far, though, the measurements, the sort of levels that they're trying to tell you how loud it is, those go away. So I wouldn't go so far that they disappear. I would go to right before they disappear so that they're as narrow as they can be, but you still see the numbers you need to see to know that you're not overdoing your audio. All right, the timeline has controls and stuff down here too. No other tabs because, again, that tends to be a little distracting, just like it would be up here. You can actually, though, have multiple tabs open that are different timelines that you're sort of jumping in between, okay? Something that comes in really handy when you've built a selects timeline with all your favorite stuff, and then your rough cut, your first rough cut timeline. So you can jump over to your selects, pull out some of your favorite moments that you pulled earlier, and drop them into your rough cut. So that's a good example the first time you find yourself going, hey, I actually do want more than one tab open. But usually it's one project at a time, and that's what's here. These are quick access to all the controls. As you can imagine, you can quick jump to all of these using some sort of keyboard command. I'm not a big keyboard shortcut guy. There are a handful that I use, and I will point them out as I go. There, of course, are lists of them out there. You can get keyboard overlays to put over your keyboard so that you can actually see all of the things that are available to you, and I encourage you to do that. It will make you a little faster. But I am too old school. I like the tactile sense of sort of dragging and dropping when it comes to certain things. So I like using the mouse. I think it's probably helpful as an instructor because that means you're not going, what keyboard did you just hit? Well, you don't have to worry about that because you're going to actually see me on screen click a button or pull something out of a menu or whatever. So it should make it a little easier to keep up with me. And then the thing I mainly don't like about this layout is we've reserved this tiny little portion of the screen for our project info. So what is our project info? Well, that's where all the loose clips that we're editing with go. That's where our sequences live. That's where our graphics live. This is where we go get things. And ideally, most nonlinear editors, starting with the Avid, going all the way back to the late 80s, early 90s, have sort of been built with a two-monitor mindset, left brain, right brain. And so in the professional world, you almost always have two monitors set up, and you actually put all this tiny little window goes onto a second monitor where you actually can go and hunt for all your stuff and lay all your windows open and find things easier. But we, of course, are working on computers that usually just have one, and I want to make it as simple for you as possible. But just know that if you are a real editor, if this is what you want to be, then you'll ultimately probably want to be able to have a two-monitor setup, because we've been doing it that way for 25 years plus, and it is just a much better, easier way to work. All your hunting and finding is on the left-hand side, very left brain, and then all the creativity stuff, the working with the timeline, doing effects, everything happens on the right, very right brain. So it works kind of nicely that way. But anyway, we have a tab here for the project. Know the interface. You see that's where you see that I typed a project name, and there it is. And there's nothing in my project. But let's take some time to thin some things out here as well. Okay, so in here we're going to ultimately have bins with footage and graphics and things like that and my sequences, and we want to stay organized. I'll tell you right now, if you don't learn to stay organized, it will eventually be your downfall. And the thing is, I'll show you some of how I do it, but the reality is it needs to be something you're going to be consistent doing. Okay, so I'm not going to tell you that there's necessarily a right or wrong way. If the system works for you, that's great, but I'm going to tell you what won't work for you, and that's just throwing anything arbitrarily into your project and having to find it, especially if the day comes that you are an editor for a client, because someone's going to be looking over your shoulder, and they're going to judge you on whether you're a professional by whether you look lost in your own stuff or if you know exactly where to find stuff when they ask for something. So have a system, get good at it, and use it consistently. So right now I got nothing in mind, but again, I feel like the interface is a little cluttered, so I'm going to look at some of these tabs and see what else we can close to make this a little easier on the eyes. So the next tab next to what is project is media browser. Now, this is the way that a lot of people import their footage. This is where you can point at a drive and go get your footage. And the thing is, that function works perfectly fine. My problem with it is that you can, because this is a window that is always open in your interface, people get confused, and this will show you thumbnails for footage that you have not actually imported into your project. And so it's easy to get lost as to whether you really brought something in or you didn't. So I'm a much bigger fan, especially for a newer editor, to not use the media browser, but in fact to go to the file menu and go and import in your footage and let it open an import window that is its own thing, that you actually know I am actively importing something in, and when it's done and the window goes away. That is a safer way to work, and it is a little more in step with a lot of programs. I know this media browser concept is starting to show up in other programs. So you got to learn how to think that way eventually, but especially if you're new, this tab is the kind of a dangerous hole to fall down. So I'm going to actually say let's close that panel. So any of these tabs can be moved around, just slid around within the display that they're showing, or you can actually take that and move it to another window. So I'm going to drag this up here. Now notice there's a little purple bar that's showing me what amount of the screen or what portion of the screen it's going to take up when I drop it. So if I drag it up where the tabs are, it shows up here as a tab. If I undock it, then it is a free floating window, which I could put somewhere else, or I can grab it again and I can drop it. If I drop it in the middle, it's going to completely overtake this screen and become the primary thing. If though, let me undock it, if I actually drag it to like where the purple thing is only along the right hand side, it splits the window in half. Now it's half what it was and half the new thing I dropped. Not exactly ideal. If I undock it and I drop it at the bottom, it's going to do the half trick again, except now it's working from the bottom up, and I just greatly reduced my video playback size, which is not what I would probably want. So let's undock it again. Now, I'm going to say libraries, which we originally found down here, and hopefully you weren't dragging things around, you were just watching me. But libraries tends to be down here. I already said I don't want the media browser down here, so I'm going to actually close it. Libraries was the next one. Libraries is only really good when you're looking through lots of footage that is not yours, stock footage, etc. Basically, it's stuff that you're not going to need for a long time. Info is handy, but there's an easy keyboard command to bring this window up when needed, so we're not going to mess with it now. I'm going to close it. And then effects is something we are going to probably want every once in a while, so I will actually keep this here. That's pretty good. And then I have markers, which is nice because you can leave a little colored little element, a little post-it note, if you will, on a specific moment in time in your footage, or a moment in time in your timeline, or an individual track on your timeline. So it's kind of cool. You can color code them. You can leave a note to yourself, hey, don't forget to put a graphic here later, whatever. And then when you start finalizing your project, you can go in, look at each of those markers, and see all the little notes you left for yourself. And as you finish the things you're telling yourself to do, you can erase them, which is kind of cool. You just get rid of them. But anyway, markers, we're not going to need it in the early stages. I'm going to say bring it up when you need it. Now, I closed the panel. What if I do want it back, right? I'm making you nervous, right? Because I'm saying, okay, we're getting rid of all these features you're going to want later. Well, what the heck do I do then? Well, anything we close can be reopened by going up to the window menu at the top. And here you will see all the windows that are available to you at all. Everything with a checkbox is actually open right now, and everything without it is not. So if I decide, oh, it is time for me to use markers, I can go here and it will come up in its last location. Wherever it was when you nuked it, it will come back there. So markers, don't need it now. History, this is sort of your history of undos. So you can undo, 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 and I want to say it's almost limitless. I don't know that I've ever really hit the limit of undos. But this gives you a list of what they all are. So if you want to selectively go in and say, I want to undo that, you just have to recognize that when you selectively undo an element, it can affect the things that are available to you to undo after that. So think about going back in time. It's literally saying, I did these 16 steps. If I go back to step 9 and lose it, well, then maybe the other steps I did aren't available anymore because it was contingent on you having done that step. So to me, history is a little... It's handy when you're doing something, when you're backpedaling in a more complex way, but most of the time I don't need it. I just undo the 3 or 4 steps I just did, and I'm happy. All right, so I'm going to lose it because it's just, again, sort of visual distractions for me. All right, so I'm going to go back, select project. Now, you may have seen me at some point I moved the border in between these because this has gotten really narrow. You do have the ability to sort of scale the elements that you're seeing here, which is nice. You can give yourself more or less timeline, more or less bottom weighted of the screen, just like we did with the volume meters over there. However, I'm going to show you a cool trick here, and that is the project window, or tab, if you will. That actually, to me, needs to be something that is more visible. So what I like to do is I like to say, let's undock this, and then when I grab it, I'm not going to drop it anywhere where it's giving me a purple indicator. I'm going to go to the edge of my entire screen, and then it will give me a green bar, which is basically saying I'm going to go completely from top to bottom of the screen if you drop this here. And that's what I want. So I'm going to let it go. Now, it hogged half of my screen. All I really cared about was making it tall, so I can actually grab the edge of it and pull it back over here. And now when I have lists of footage, I actually have a long enough window to see what I'm doing, which is nice. Now, the other thing that I'm going to want to see is my whole timeline, or as much of it as I can at a time. So the fact that I left effects behind down here is taking up a lot of space. So I'm going to undock it as well. And I am going to say, let's tuck our effects into the project window as well. And now I can get to it whenever I need to. It's right here. All right. I could also choose to tuck it into the background or into the tabs of any of these other windows. But I'm going to say for now, let's keep it there just so we're all on the same page. Now notice my timeline just got a lot wider. That's going to be much nicer as I'm editing to be able to see what it is I'm doing. All right, so so I've talked a little bit about these. Let's say I know I'm not going to be changing my layout much now, so I want to gain back a little screen real estate up there. So I just double click on the sort of empty area here with no words on it, and it goes away. That's a happy thing. So we probably need to import in some footage so that we can actually sort of see something while I'm clicking around. So I'm going to import some footage. A couple different ways you can do it. You can right click into nothing in the project window and it'll let you start importing. Or what I would recommend you do is I would make a bin, which is like a folder for media inside your project. I would make a bin to put the footage in that you're about to bring in. Now, if you point at a folder's worth of footage, it will assume that whatever folder you're pointed to out when you go to import it is something you want to preserve, that organization of it, and it makes a bin by default for you with that folder's name, which is handy because you could basically stage all your footage out on your hard drive before you ever import it in, and then when you import it, you could import the highest of that folder structure, and boom, everything will come in and all the bins will be made for you. There's nothing wrong with that. All right, but I'm gonna do a single clip, maybe two, so I'm actually going to do a new bin. Now you can get to new items either by going to the File menu or again right-clicking in the project window into sort of the nothingness area, and you'll notice New Bin is an option. If you do it in the File menu, you can see that you actually have a lot of new items you can generate. Let's start with the bin though, and I'm going to call it Footage just to be boring. And if I double-click it, it opens in a new tab in this same window. Okay, so now it looks empty, but I'm not looking at my whole project. I'm only looking inside this folder. I can jump back to my project window, and there, sure enough, is my bin that I made. It also has what some people refer to as a caret here. You can click it left and right, and if there was stuff in it, you'd see all the stuff and have access to it. But it is kind of nice, especially when you're dealing with footage, to be able to have it open in its own bin. The fact that when I double click it, it opens in its own new tab here is something I can set with the preferences of the program. So if you don't like that, if you want it to open in its own window or whatever, there are several options. You can go into preferences, and there are a boatload of preferences. So if we go into preferences here, we open any of these subcategories, it will give you a window with all those subcategories down the side. So you have general controls here. The appearance, you can make it lighter, darker, things like that. All the things related to audio hardware, whether your sound is coming out of your computer speakers or your headphones. Sometimes when that gets jacked up, you can go to audio hardware here and fix that. Your auto save, how often it's actually going to save. You can set, I have mine for 10 minutes. I think it defaults to 15. But the point is there are a whole bunch here, control devices, graphics, how long graphics will be when it generates those. All the colors that are available to you when you tag footage are all here. Lots and lots of stuff. And honestly, the deeper you get into editing, the more you'll be grateful that you have some control there. Most of it you live with sort of the defaults they've set. They know what they're doing. They've set things pretty close to what most people would want. But occasionally people have personal preferences, and that's fine. And I'm an old dog, so I have old preferences and logic that I've used for years. So it's nice to be able to go in and trick out things to work the way I expect them to work. One that's worth looking at here, especially if you're working on your own computer, is the memory. How much memory is being set aside for Premiere. And so you can set aside your RAM here, and you can set thresholds and all of that, and you can have it optimized to keep as much memory free as possible or give you the best performance possible. So you have some ability to change those things, which is pretty cool. You can hook up other devices for output. You can set your timeline settings, which are kind of nice to have. But again, these all will make sense as we get deeper in. All right, I'm going to cancel that because all I was really trying to do was import some footage. I want to make sure that I'm in the bin where I want the footage to go before I do import. Okay, so if I'm here, it's going to be loose in my project. I don't want that. I want to go into the footage bin. Now I know that stuff's going to come in here. Let's go find some footage to import. So I, again, can either right-click and do import in the gray area, or I can go to the File menu. We'll keep it simple. We'll go to the File menu, and I'll do import, and then I'm going to get an obvious import window. We'll do this. We're going to go into footage, and I'm going to steal a shot. All right. Import the clip. It goes in, and now I have a clip inside my project, which again, if I do the little caret thing, I'm back on the project tab. If I do the caret thing, you can see that it's revealing what's there. If I'm in the footage bin, it does it as a list by default, but you can go down here and say, no, I actually want to see icon view, which is kind of nice. And then there's this freeform view, which allows you to do icons, but you can lay them out whatever way you want. Let's just keep it simple and do icon view. All right, notice I'm not even clicking, I'm just mousing over this and it's actually showing me the footage in there, which is kind of cool. If I double click it, it will load it in my source side. If you are still in list view, if you double click it, it's going to think you want to rename the clip. You got to click on the icon and then it will actually load. Okay, so it's an easy mistake. And anytime you're dragging things, try to grab by the icon and it will tend to work better. All right, so here's my footage, right? So there's a little what's called a playhead here. You can shuttle back and forth and you can actually see the clip go forward and back. You got some guys on motorcycles there. It's kind of cool. But let's talk a little bit about this interface here. So we have the ability to go back and forth. We have a play button, which turns into a stop button when it's playing. All right. And we've got the ability to do different types of edits. You can insert, which is basically going to pull apart your timeline and shove this new clip in, making room for it. Overwrite, which means if there's something already in the timeline at that point when you hit this, it's going to overlap it, which is fine if you're on the track above what you've already been editing, and we're going to get to that. But those are the two main edits. Am I inserting or overwriting? You can do the same thing in a word processing program. Am I replacing? Am I inserting? What am I doing? When you go back and type somewhere where you already typed, is it going to push everything down because I'm inserting new words? That's sort of the default, but you can change it to something else in most word processing programs. Maybe you've come across that. If you have a big enough screen, you can say, show me this footage at 100% its original size. Mine clearly can't, so when it does that, there's a whole bunch of screen that I'm missing because it actually is too big. So fit is sort of the setting you want normally, which means no matter how big I make this, it's going to scale it to try to fit comfortably within the box it's allowed. Okay. You also have the ability to change the resolution here. Do you want to see the footage at half res or at quarter res? These are helpful sometimes when your computer's older and it can't quite handle all the heavy lifting of editing. You can turn down some of these settings and it'll help. If I want to drag my footage down into the timeline, I have three ways I can do it. I can grab only the video. If there was audio, and there's not, on this clip, I could drag only the audio down to there, or I can drag them both by just dragging the video playback portion, and it will assume that I want all of it, audio and video. It's just there's no audio in this clip. All right, so that again is a very tactile way to do it, and you'll see me doing it that way. But there's nothing wrong with hitting overwrite or insert, assuming you've marked wherever you want it to go in the timeline. Okay. And of course, there are keyboard equivalents there. The comma, the period will give you those actions with a simple keyboard click. So anytime you mouse over something, if there is a keyboard shortcut, it's trying to show you what it is. And I'm on a Mac, so you're going to see things that are Mac oriented. Your time code for the clip, your duration of the clip of what you've marked. So if I was going to edit this, I would say, well, let's say I want to come in right about here, and I hit I for the letter I for in, and O for the word out. And I've basically said I like it from here to here. The rest I don't care about. Maybe I want this side road to go by, so I want to go a little further down. If I change my mind and I hit O again, it blows away my old one, sets the new one. So there's no reason to go back and clear it if you can just mark a new one where you want it to go. All right, so maybe I just only want the moment when this road goes by. So I'm going to hit a new I in. Now I know the road goes by, leaves, and it's out, and that's the end of the shot that I care about. All right, so here's the thing. If I do an edit right now, either by hitting these things or dragging it down to the timeline, it's going to make a new sequence for me. It is going to set that sequence to the compression or codec that the footage is captured at. That is not what I want. That is a bad codec for editing 99% of the time. Out of a camera, fresh out of a camera, unless it's shooting something like ProRes, you generally will not ever want to do that. So what do? We need to hand make a new timeline. We need to make it so that it is optimized for editing, so that it is something that is going to work well for us and give us a high quality master and give us all the resolution we will need as we start getting into color correction and doing graphics and things like that. Okay, so what do we have to do? Well, we actually have to say, I want to make a new timeline, and it's going to start asking us questions. And one of the things it's going to ask us is, what is the frame rate of your footage and what is the size of your footage? because you don't want to be too terribly out of step with those numbers when you set up your timeline. There are exceptions. I intentionally edit 4K footage in a 1080 timeline so that I have some ability to zoom in on it and, you know, reframe if necessary. So there are reasons, but we're going to go with the simplest thing, which is we want to assume we want to match the footage. Now I have only one clip to judge by, but if I right click on it and I actually go to properties, a little window comes up and tells me, okay, here's the name of your clip, here's where it's located, here's what kind of file it is, etc., etc. But look, it is 1920 1080 at a frame rate of 29.97 frames per second, which is essentially 30 frames a second with a couple of frames dropped for accuracy. But it is a pixel aspect ratio of 1, meaning it's nothing weird and stretchy. It's a normal square-shaped pixel, and it is 2997 at 1920 1080. This is standard HD, broadcast standard, meaning it's 2997. So when I say, okay, fine, I close that window and I say I need to make a new sequence, or timeline, as I've referred to it many times, you're going to be parked on something like DV, NTSC, maybe one of these standards, whatever. DV is a dead format. It's been dead for 10 years, okay? This is not pertinent to us. But we can start with this setting and we can go over to the settings where we can control and we can start changing things, and that's what we're going to do. So regardless of what it's on, let's go to the settings, and when we click to that tab, all the choices change, right? So since we started with DV, it's starting with the wrong thing up here. We want to go to an editing mode that is different than what it is defaulting to. We actually want to go to a custom mode, okay? Our next one is time base, which is our frame rate. Yes, 2997 is fine because that's what our footage is, right? So why challenge the system to work at anything but? All right, so the next choice, we have to type in 1920 1080 in order to get the size and shape the way we want. But it's going to fight us a little bit if we don't jump to the next window. So let's go to the next window, and if you remember when we looked at the information on our footage, I said it was set to a square pixel or a 1.0 relationship. Height and width is the same. So if we change that, then it will be a little easier when we say, okay, now I want to change this. So frame size. The width is always bigger than the height. That's why we do 1920 by 1080. Do not hit return when you're typing in those numbers because it will close this whole window out, and we don't want to do that yet. We're not done. I just clicked out of that box, and then boom, it showed me, okay, that's a 16:9 relationship in terms of width versus height. Is that what you want? Yes, it is. And yes, it's square. Next is fields. We talked hopefully a little bit about interlace. If we didn't, then just know that we don't want interlace footage. We don't want to generally work with interlace unless you're going straight to broadcast. So we normally want to go to progressive. We want nice, whole, full resolution frames. All right, and then it's already set to 2997, which is right because we set it up there. As we go down, the sample rate for audio, all of that tends to be already set correctly for us. What we care the most about is this video preview format. So basically when it does a render, what codec is it going to use? And the reality is your entire sequence will get rendered before it gets exported. So we want to set this to something very deliberate. So what I recommend you do is going into the MPEG iframe only, which is good. If we talked about compression, iframe is the individual frames that are actually fully scanned. So this isn't necessarily bad, but there's a better option than MPEG. And that is if you go into the QuickTime collection of codecs, then down here you can go into the codec individually and you can set it for ProRes 422, which is the standard broadcast quality ProRes. There are, as you can see here, other flavors of ProRes. You probably don't need to go into them, but normal ProRes is pretty darn good, and it's used in broadcast TV every day, so you're going to be happy with it. All right. This whole maximum bit depth and render quality, I've adjusted those and never seen a visual difference. It only has made my media take up more space. So maybe there's a plus side, maybe there's an application where these things matter, but I'm going to tell you, just go with the default. It'll be fine. All right, and then don't be sloppy. Name your sequence. They put it at the bottom. You've made all these hard decisions. Now, what do you want to call this? And I'm going to call it Demo 1. I hit return, boom, the sequence gets created. It is created it right up here in my footage bin. Why? Because that was the bin that was open when I actually said create a new sequence. Is that where I want it to go? Absolutely not, right? That's my footage bin. That's confusing. So if I go back to my project window, I can actually pull it out of there, and now it's loose. It's not in the footage bin, and I actually can do what you know I'm going to recommend, which is create a new bin, call them sequences. I like to do capital SEQ, lowercase s, because it kind of stands out visually, and then I can put that footage, that sequence right in there. Now I have a sequence bin with the demo in it, and I have a footage bin with a clip in it. And if I double click the sequence bin, it will open in a new tab and I can get to it. Now, look, I can't get to my footage bin because this is too narrow. Do I have to scale it out to make it so I can see it? No, you can actually just click on the little fast forward looking little double arrow thing, and then you can jump to whatever bin you need and it will make it accessible to you. Okay, so don't panic. But it automatically loaded it in the timeline. So now I have tracks down here. Audio tracks, video tracks, divided by a little double line thing down the middle, which is movable. If you have more audio than video, you can move that center line up and make more room for audio levels. If you have more video levels, you can move it down and just have your audios take up a very little space at the bottom. Either one will work. Okay? And then you have scroll bars within those as your stuff gets more stacked, which is kind of nice. You can also make these tracks thicker or thinner. Let's throw some video in there so that you can see what it looks like when I do that. So I'm going to pull this motorcycle clip that I already marked an in and out for, and I'm going to pull it down here and drop it at the beginning of my timeline. All right, now if you remember, it's not a very wide thing, and my timeline is showing 9 minutes worth of content. So in context, that is just a tiny little sliver. Well, what if I want to zoom in? Well, I can hit plus or minus. Plus will zoom me in, minus will zoom me out. Okay, no other keys necessary, just plus or minus. If you want to zoom in and have everything that your timeline has in it, have it just fit within your line of view, then you're going to hit the key above the return key, a little forward slash or backslash key, and boom. It will actually scale it to fit in the window, which is very nice. It's kind of my favorite go-to muscle memory key, besides save, of course. All right, so if I want this to be thicker or thinner, if I hold down Command and I do plus or minus, it will do larger or taller or narrower video tracks. And you'll notice as I get big enough, thumbnails actually show up and I can actually see what that clip is. And we haven't talked about the wrench. You'll notice there's a wrench here, there's a wrench here, there's a wrench here. They basically tuck little wrenches around to give you more options than the buttons that were accessible to you. So these are extra things you can change. So if I go to the wrench in the timeline, I can say show video keyframes or don't show video keyframes. Now, if Command plus or minus gives you video control, Option plus or minus gives you audio control. You want thicker audio tracks, you got to go Option plus or minus. On a PC, it'll be whatever the equivalent of Option is. I can never remember. But it's the two alternating sort of control things you have. I think it might be Control. I'm sorry, I'm not a PC guy. So, kind of cool to be able to do that. And if you go thick enough, if it's on, you will see a little line here, and that is, in this case, the opacity of the clip. So I can make it more transparent or less transparent just by clicking on that line. In your audio, when you have audio, and you have the lines thick enough, it will give you a line you can drag up and down, and when you do that, it turns the volume up and down. All right? So we'll get into that much later, but just want you to know that's what these are. The things you're most likely to want to adjust in a hurry. How visible or invisible is the track, how loud or quiet is the audio. All right, so now that I have this down here, you can see that we actually, there's a clip. We can put it on a different track if we want. Video plays from the top down, so it's always going to look at whatever's on top first. So maybe it's time for me to go grab another clip. Let me do that really quick. All right, so now I've got another clip. I'm going to double click on the icon, load it over here, and I say, ooh, I like that. I'm going to mark it from here to say here, and there's no audio, but I'm going to grab the video only. I'm going to stack it on top. So now, since it's on top of the old one, I don't see the motorcycle guys, but if I slide it over, now you do, right? So you see motorcycle guys until this goes over the top of it. Now you'll notice my playback window has a little safety margins on it. We'll talk about that later, but I'm going to turn it off because it's a little distracting. So I'm going to go into the wrench for this window, and I'm going to say turn off margins. So I unchecked safe margins. All right, so now you can see what it's doing. Now when I say the transparency, notice again I can click on this, I can pull it down, and then you'll start to see the shot underneath depending on how much I have it set for. Right? I can also fade in this shot. I can actually click on the edge of it, right click and say apply the default transition, and boom, it gives me a dissolve. So now I'm on Motorcycle Guys until it fades into that shot, and I just hit the space bar to play it and then space bar to stop it. I could have also hit the play button here or hit the letter L to go forward. All right. So basic stacking, basic interface here. If I wanted it to start, I went out of my way to say this is where I wanted the in to be. Now I could, if I changed my mind and wanted the in to be back here, I of course can go up here and hit the letter I and O, and I can redo all these edits. Or I can actually say, all right, I want to actually trim this clip back. So I'm going to grab the edge of this clip and I can pull it back. And now I'm seeing an earlier portion of this shot. So I'm going to have to slide it down, right? If I still want to see this stuff here, then I have to slide it back down. So if I grab the edge and I drag it out even more, I can get an earlier portion of that shot. All right, so that's basic trimming. You just grab the edge of what it is you're playing with and you can move it back. And then I'm just grabbing the clip and sliding it around. Very basic sort of interface, but all of the magic is going to happen down here in the timeline. It's all going to be about just sliding and clicking and dragging and trimming. So the next thing to sort of pay attention to is the fact that there is routing on these tracks. Now what do I mean by routing? Well, if I was going to put this clip, so I just deleted this clip and I'm going to put this clip in again. As I told you, I can do an overwrite, which is generally what I want. I'm going to hit my little show the whole sequence key. All right. If I want to see the whole thing, and let's edit it in again. So it doesn't know where I want to put it because I have not put an in or an out down here. It's always going to use the location of my blue line as the assumed in point, the start location of where this clip should line up with. So if I do an overwrite, there it went, it dropped it in. That's fine. If I do a insert, notice as I scale my whole timeline, notice it actually tore apart all the other tracks and made room for this to be there, and then it picks up where it left off, just as if I took scissors and cut that original clip open. Now sometimes you want to do that. Sometimes you want to add something in the middle like an interview and you need everything to be pushed down. But as you can see, this is pretty destructive. I just screwed up what was going on track 1. So if I undo it and I go back here and I say, no, I want to override it, I'm good. Now, it is defaulting to going to the top track because I have aligned video track 1 of the source clip. These are the tracks on the timeline I'm building. So it is aligned 1 with 2. So when each time I do an edit, it assumes I want to put it on track 2. If I change this, if I point it to track 3 and I do an edit, now it starts putting things on track 3. See that? Now these only really apply when you're using buttons, but you may get to a point where you're using buttons, and there are other times where this routing can matter a lot, like copying and pasting. So if I want to copy and paste this beginning clip, let's say the motorcycle is supposed to start and end this piece. If I do copy, so Command C, and I go down timeline and I paste it, it is going to put it on the track it originally came from, assuming that the highlight didn't move. But if I undo that and I put it on track 2 and I paste it, now it put it on track 2. If I put it on 3, it's going to put it on 3. Okay, so whatever is hot, that's where the paste is going to happen. Okay, so you want to pay attention to which of these is on. And again, if you decide to do either using these buttons or the period and comma key to do your edits, which again, there's nothing wrong with, I tend to not work that way, then you have to constantly be thinking about, okay, if I'm bringing something in, there's only one track of video on this because it's a piece of footage, where's it going to go? So all of these things start to really matter to you. But that's part of why I like to drag, right? So I can drag the video and I can drag it to whatever track I intend for it to go on. It doesn't matter what's highlighted over here. It's going to let me drop it wherever I want. So another reason why I like the tactile sort of dragging thing. All right, let's say I want to cut between the motorcycle and this. So I could line my clips up like this and go, okay, it cuts from motorcycle dudes to buildings. All right, if I want to change where that happens, right, I can grab the edge of a clip and I can say, oh, I want it to come in a little later where we're seeing that GE building. Now I can move it over, and now when we cut from the motorcycles, we're on the GE building. Oh, not enough of it. Fine, I'll grab the edge of it. I'll pull it out a little further. Now the footage goes a little bit longer. All right. Or I can again stack it and just say, well, maybe I want the GE building to show up around the time that the road is here. So I can say, all right, I parked where the road is where I want it. I can grab this clip, drag it over, and it will try to align and snap to the edge of anything that it finds. All right, that's called snapping, and you can turn it on and off right here if it bugs you. Sometimes it will bug you. Most of the time it's helpful. But sometimes you want to turn it off. You can click it off here, and then it will allow you. It won't try to do any of that for you. All right. So now I get the same result, right? Now when the road is where I want it, about here, it will cut to the other shot because I stacked it. I like this. I like stacking. Okay, stacking to me is a much more dynamic way to sort of work with the timing of what you're building. Okay, if I have to work down here and I have to keep moving and finessing and everything to get it right, this takes more mouse clicks, and to me, you're less likely to tinker. If it's on top, and as I undo these and I put it back, if it's on top and I want to see, well, what happens if the road is allowed to go just a little further? Well, I have two choices. I can either do one click and drag over of this, and then I'll see the road go over further, or I can just grab the edge of this and trim it over, and that's it. I can watch it. Right? So, to me, being able to sort of put your alternate things on top, and you can go back and forth, right? So if the motorcycle comes back again, oh, look what I did. Did you see me drag that right out of the bin to my timeline? Yes, you do not have to load it here if you don't want to. The thing is, it's going to remember whatever my in and out was the last time I touched it, which also means that if I had never put an in and an out in this shot, then it would have brought the entire clip down here, and that might have overlapped other stuff. So there are dangers of doing it that way unless you're earlier in your project, okay, in the process. But my point is, I can do the same if I sort of stair step in what we call checkerboard. Then I could say, oh yeah, and when the GE building gets that far, I want to go back to the motorcycle guys, but I want the road maybe over here, so cool, I'll just pull this down and I'll get the timing exactly like I want it. There you go. So to me, going back and forth is a little easier, and sometimes you can stack on top because you're building graphic layers and stuff like that. It all becomes very, very handy to do this with. Okay, and when things get too big, you can scroll just the video tracks up and down or just the audio tracks up and down. All right, you can also make more room for your whole timeline by grabbing the edge of this, but notice the more I do it, the smaller my playback windows get. So it's a trade-off. Maybe I need more room to see the footage and stuff over here, so I can go this way and still sort of split the difference between these two so they stay the same size. So lots of ways to sort of dynamically lay the screen out the way you want with things where you want them. And even though that's confusing for someone who doesn't know how to do it, once you know how to do it, it becomes one of the best features of Premiere because you can literally put everything right where you need it for the nature of the work that you're doing right now. Okay? So that is the basic interface without getting into too many of the advanced controls. 80% of the work you do will be related to pulling things in, marking ins and outs and dropping them down here into the timeline and then finessing them down here. All right. The last concept I want to be sure and show you is 3-point editing. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's imagine I'm going to get rid of my clip of the building, and let's imagine I have a motorcycle scene and then the continuation of a motorcycle scene. All right, so we'll assume that the road's already gone by, right? So now the moment is we see the road come into frame and leave, and then down here we can't have the road come into frame again. So if I want to basically see the road go by, go to the buildings, and then back to the motorcycle guys, then I can put the city shot, which I'm going to double click here. It loads it in here. And I can say, okay, I like the moment where we can see the GE sign. So I'm going to mark an N here at the letter I, mark an O somewhere over here. And then I say, oh, but I don't know if that's exactly the length of time that needs to fill this hole. So what am I going to do? Well, in the olden days, you had to do it this way. Okay, so 3-point editing was a whole concept. And what do I mean by that? The editing program would need to know 3 points and able to do any kind of edit. All right, so in this case, it has 2 points. It has an in point at the start of what you want, an end point of the end of what you think you want, but it doesn't know where it goes. Without a third point, it's going to assume wherever your blue line is where you want that that clip to go. So I'm going to move it down here to 1, right? We're going to route it so that when we do the edit, it goes onto track 1, which is dangerous, but I'm doing this on purpose to make a point. All right, so if I forget that I haven't set an in down here, and I do the edit while it's parked here, what's going to happen? Well, an overwrite just wrote over my motorcycle scene. So now I just lost a bunch of that clip because it just bulldozed over it. So let's undo it. If I go to insert, it pushed it down and it split the blank area in half. So that didn't really do what I wanted, right? Because now it goes to emptiness before the motorcycle shot. So that sucked too. So either of those is not going to do what you want if you haven't done a third point, because it's going to do it based on your blue line. So let's say you remember, oh, Bryce said the blue line is by default the in. I don't want to take the time to hit the letter I. I'm just going to line up perfectly with the beginning of this. Okay, if I do an overwrite, which is a little safer, right? Because if I do this, it pushes the whole gap and everything down. So we don't want to do insert. We do overwrite. It still bulldozes over because the clip I chose is too long for that hole, right? So if I undo it, I could say, all right, well, let's manually set an in. And look, it's starting to gray an area saying, okay, it's going to write over this section. And then I go to the end of the blank hole to the beginning of the motorcycle and I hit an O. Now I've marked a section here and a section here. So in a sense, I've given it 1, 2, 3, 4 points. Well, 4 points is a problem, because as soon as I go to do the edit, it's going to say, wait a second, your source is still longer than the destination or the hole I'm trying to fill. What do you want to do? Change the speed of the clip to fit to fill, meaning it's going to make the shot run faster or slower to fit it, which sometimes is fine, but sometimes looks choppy and weird. You can ignore the in point on the source side. You can ignore the out point on the source side. You could ignore the in point on the sequence. You could ignore the out point on the sequence. All right. And you can set a default. If you know I'm constantly having to select the same thing, I think I want it to just do this every time, you can do it. To me, that's a little dangerous because I don't know how to go in and say, what if I want to break the do it all the time rule? I don't know how to do that. So I'm more inclined to say, let me make the decision. But this is the important thing here. Okay, 4 points bad, 3 points good. All right, so if I say, well, I care more about not screwing up what I have going on down here, I just arbitrarily guessed at where I wanted the out to go. So I wanted to basically disregard my out point. I can either try to do it again and tell it ignore my source out, or I could just anticipate I don't want to have to click through that many windows. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to clear the out. So if you do Option O, it will clear your out. And now it has 3 points, an in, no out, an in and an out. And it's going to line up the ins and it's going to use the out information that's already been marked. And it won't even fight you. It will just go, here you go. And now it didn't change the speed or anything. It just only showed as much as what would fit in that hole. That is basic 3-point editing. That is the way it had to be done in the era of tape, and it's still the logic sort of carries over to nonlinear. But you can see, having spent so much of my career having to solve all of those problems before making a creative decision, you can see why I might better like the idea of going back to the situation I had, not having any ins and outs set except for my original, well, I really like this moment, pull it down here, stick it on top, and see, oh, it's that much bigger. Okay, maybe I'll come in a little sooner. Okay, that's not bad. Maybe I'll just come out of that shot a little sooner and I'll just trim it like this. And then I'll play it. Oh, that feels good. Or no, I don't like how that feels. Undo it, and we'll just move the motorcycles down a little bit. And now I get to see all of the shot as I intended and still pick up at the motorcycles approximately where I had them. So to me, it's about not getting in the way of your creative groove. Being able to say, oh, I'm doing this by feel. I'm doing this because I'm inspired and I'm realizing this could lead to that, could lead to this. And I don't want to have to be thinking about math and 3 points and all that. So it's not that it's wrong. It's that I'm going to encourage you to do it in a more tactile way. And I think you'll become a more creative editor much faster, which is, I'm sure, much more probably what you care about, as opposed to necessarily being faster with the keys. All right. So that is the basic interface. Those are the basic things that you will do over and over and over again. There are lots of fancier things, but in terms of telling a story, it's always going to come back to the timing of things, the moments you choose to show and not show, or hear and not hear. We didn't even get into sound. But the point is, you're able to stack things, you're able to play with timing dynamically, and you're able to basically get it to tell the story that you're trying to tell. And you can make your interface look however you need it to look to make you comfortable for the stage of storytelling that you're in. So good luck with that.